Okay, when Tom and I were 11 years old, is when the church first started letting 11-year-olds go to Boy Scouts. Up until then, you had to be 12 to be a Boy Scout, and the national policy changed. So for that year, we were 11 and we could go to the Boy Scouts. And in those days, you really had to know your stuff to get your badge. It wasn't the way it is today in a lot of places where the Scouts, they go to something and oh yeah, and then they get a badge or they get this. You had to be able to recite your Scout law, your Scout oath, go through all that stuff by memory. And it was hard to get a badge. So when we were 11, we were Boy Scouts, and then when we turned 12, our Boy Scout leader moved away. And so we didn't have a leader. And the bishop had all girls, and his wife said, farm boys don't need Boy Scouts. Scouts are for city boys. And that other counselor in the bishopric didn't have any kids at all. And then the second counselor was a grandpa whose kids are all grown up and gone, so they didn't have any parents really in scouting. But we still went to Mutual every week, and one of the older kids would bring her scout books and we'd sit down and say, okay, let's study this. So we'd go through all the scout books, reading and studying and talking and learning stuff. And then we decided we were going to go on a hike. So we get organized and we'd go on a hike. So we went on a winter hike, and one of the kids fell through the ice in the creek. So we got him out and we got our fire started and said, sorry, but you got to strip down, your clothes are wet, so you can stand by the fire, keep turning around and get dried off and keep warm. As we dried his clothes out. So when springtime came, the council wanted to have a camporee in the Elba Park. Elba Valley looks like one of those places you see in the calendar. You know, there's meadows and green grass and the mountains, and there was a creek running through the church park, fish in it. So he says, okay, they told us, they asked the bishop, can we use your park? And he said, sure. So they told us about it. So us boys that were that age, we showed up there. We had all our gear. We set up our tents, and we had one tent set up to keep all our supplies in, and the other tent was where we were going to sleep. And so all of a sudden these scout leaders came around, one guy wearing his Smokey the Bear hat and his clipboard, and he said, who are you guys? We said, we're Troop 17. And he says, Troop 17? There is no such thing as a Troop 17. Yes, we live here in Elba. We're Troop 17. He says, no, they haven't had a Boy Scout troop in this town for over a year. Uh-oh. So you guys are not Boy Scouts. But we live here. Well, you can't be in the park. You got to go. So we had all our stuff. In those days it was heavy. Cast iron pans, pots. You didn't have a down sleeping bag. You had grandma's old heavy quilts and all our stuff. So we started down the road dragging all our stuff. 3/4 of a mile, we were going to go down to the store and get a ride home. So as we're driving down the road, these older high school boys came along and says, where are you guys going? Aren't you going to camporee? We says, no, they kicked us out. They can't kick you out. This is our town, yeah. We got kicked out. So we went home. See, this was on Friday night. And then Sunday at church, we heard about what happened is these older boys went back, and just down the road was a dairy farm with 100 milk cows in the corral. So they opened the gate. They drove 100 cows up the road, put them into the park, and shut the gate. So here's 100 cows, and this is in May when there's green grass. And if you've seen a cow eat green grass, I mean, she'll squirt green cow manure 10 feet. And so here's the cows wandering through the camp. Cow smells apples. Cow smells oatmeal. Cow smells pancake mix. So here are the cows going through the camp, raiding all their food, knocking over tents, everything else going on. Oh, man. So here was a dilemma the next morning. 100 cows in the Boy Scout camp, knocking over tents, eating their food, breaking things. So the next year, even though all this happened, the scouts all said, we like going there, we want to go there again, because you had, ideal place to camp. So next year they asked the bishop if they could have it, and he says, and we're inviting all the kids that live around here, they can come as guests. You don't have to be an official Boy Scout, you can come as a guest, because somewhere in the fine print it says you can invite boys to come to a scouting event to get them interested to join Boy Scouts. Problem was we wanted to join, we just didn't have any leaders. So they gave us a list of what was the events were going to be, so we practiced. And we asked some of the older guys that were 17 or 18 or 19, here's what we're going to do. They says, okay, one of the things you're going to have to do is boil water and make it boil over. So what you do is you mix up some, like 2 tablespoons of powdered soap in some water, and you stir it real good. You put it in your pan and you slosh it around and you heat it over the stove till you got a coating of soap inside your pan. So as soon as it gets close to boiling, you get all these bubbles coming over your pan. So you're going to be the first one to get your water to boil. And then how do you make a fire? Well, you know where to find the dry grass. Don't get anything green. So we were the first ones to get our fire. We were the first ones to get our pot to boil over. And I was the person that tied the knots. And I was the fastest one tying knots and all the different events. So we ended up taking first place. And so, us country boys showed those city kids what it's all like. And they didn't have any cows that year.
The end.